Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Maeta. Thank you so much for joining us today for this week's lecture of Volume 2 of our 12-week neuropsychology didactic series, bringing you lectures from experts in the field covering different topics each week. This series was created by trainees and early career neuropsychologists to provide free, high-quality didactic opportunities. We would like to thank our sponsors for their financial support of this series. And before we start, here are the disclaimers. This training is not meant to replace formal education in neuropsychology, and the views of the speakers are their own. Questions can be submitted via the Q&A box on the lower left of your screen, and we will have a recording of today's lecture uploaded to our website later this week. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Sean McClintock for today's lecture on NIH Fellowship and Career Development Grants. Dr. McClintock is an Associate Professor of Psychiatry and the Director of Research Training within the Clinical Psychology Doctoral Program at UT Southwestern Medical Center. He is an Adjunct Associate Professor at Duke University School of Medicine. He received his BA in Psychology from the University of North Texas, his master's degree in rehabilitation counseling psychology in 2005, and his PhD in clinical psychology in 2006, as well as a Master of Science in Clinical Sciences in 2011 from UT Southwestern Medical Center. He completed postdoctoral training in clinical neuropsychology and mood disorders research as a National Institute of Mental Health T32 postdoctoral fellow at UT Southwestern Medical Center, and he completed postdoctoral training in brain stimulation and therapeutic modulation at Columbia University, New York State Psychiatric Institute. Dr. McClintock has received continuous grant funding from the National Institutes of Health, NIH, since 2006, and has mentored graduate students, postdoctoral fellows, and early career faculty who successfully obtained NIH fellowship and career development grants. Dr. McClintock has over 100 peer-reviewed articles, 12 book chapters, and is editing a book centered around his research focused on the neuropsychological effects of mood disorders and neuromodulation therapeutic intervention. So certainly an expert on this topic, and we're really looking forward to today's lecture. So I will stop sharing my screen and let Dr. McClintock take it away. Oops, I think you're muted.
Haha, I need to always remember to unmute myself. Thank you so much, Julia, for that very kind and gracious introduction. And thank you and the organizers for the invitation to be with all of you and all the people on today's video. I hope everybody is safe and well during this time, especially as COVID continues to spike, and hopefully people are being socially distanced, wearing masks, and just being as safe as possible. Today's topic has nothing to do with COVID at this time. Rather, we're going to focus on aspects of actually grant writing and research opportunities. And so I'll be sharing my slides now. I'll be turning my video off for a moment so that we can have that there. And now what you're seeing when you think about research grant writing, and it's complex and involves a lot. And if anybody goes to www.phdcomics.com like I did as a graduate student, or even now, right, we know how it should work, writing, right? We have our plan, we know what we want to do, we have our laptop, our computer, our tablet, whatever it is. However, we also have these aspects over here where our prefrontal cortex, and we're like, gosh, what is going on? Our amygdala and our limbic system starts thinking of fear and panic and other aspects, because let's face facts, grant writing can be quite overwhelming. If we ever think about writing a paper, a book chapter, a letter to the editor, grant writing involves so much more than those aspects. It involves a multiplex system of putting together multiple components in a limited amount of time to try to secure funding for your future opportunities. And so part of what today's process is to go through the aspects focusing on the National Institute of Health Fellowship and Career Development Program as a guide for other multiple types of grants that you might be writing. Now, just to give some disclosures, I do have grant funding from the NIH, and I'm also a consultant for Pearson Assessment. I will discuss nothing with Pearson at all during this conversation. Our objectives, we're going to just briefly talk about the NIH system, review the F and K award series, because they really are the impetus for the fellowship and the career development series that they offer, and then really talk about writing tips and strategies, a few resources, and then, of course, question and answers. So the NIH, and the reason why I highlight the NIH is because for the most part of the United States, this is the system where other agencies tend to follow. And actually across the globe, the NIH partners with other sort of granting agency systems from other countries. And so they all have a bit of a similar suit in that the grants have certain structures you must follow. Now, for the NIH, there are about 27 institutes that we can apply to in the United States and actually across the world as well, depending on what certain mechanism you'd be applying for. In red, I just highlighted different aspects where more like clinical psychology, clinical neuropsychology, behavioral psychology, health psychology might be applying to, for example, the National Cancer Institute, the National Institute on Aging, the National Institute of Mental Health, or the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke. So there are multiple agencies within the NIH system that offer different grant aspects, different types of grant funding mechanisms that we all have an opportunity to apply to. Now, also at the NIH, you can do an intramural system or you can do an extramural system. Intramural just basically means you're actually working inside the NIH itself. And they actually have pre-doctoral training opportunities, as well as postdoctoral fellowship opportunities, and even early career investigator opportunities to take advantage of. Extramural would be like, for example, me at UT Southwestern Medical Center, I would apply to the NIH to get a grant. So hence they would then fund me if I was fortunate enough to get the grant. And then quote unquote, I have an extramural funding opportunity. So I always encourage people, look at both intramural and extramural, depending on, do you want to be inside the NIH or you want to be outside of the NIH for conducting your research. In terms of awards from fellowship to career development, the F Awards series is a grant that you would write that is owned by you and the institute. Now, the reason why that's critical is because when you get it at your institute, let's say if I got mine at UT Southwestern Medical Center, if I was to leave UT Southwestern Medical Center, I cannot take that grant with me as an F award. The T Award series, something actually I was a recipient of as a fellow, is actually owned by the institute, and then people apply for it in a competitive way, and then are granted sort of a fellowship slot in that T Award training grant at that specific institute. So different institutes around the United States, probably even across the globe, have these different types of funding mechanisms to support postdoctoral fellowship, as well as in certain cases, pre-doctoral fellowship training opportunities. And last that I'll talk about will be the K Award series. These are for actually early career investigators. That is, you've already completed your doctoral training. And so now it's your postdoctoral fellowship, you're past your postdoctoral fellowship. And this is owned by you, not the institute. So again, if you actually got this and you were to move elsewhere, you could take this grant with you. So that's a bonus of this one, is that you are the sole proprietor of it. So let's talk about the F grant series. Now, this stands specifically for the Ruth Kirschenstein National Research Service Award, and you can get it as a pre-doctoral, usually the FOO or the F31 series, and you can have the postdoctoral fellowship, and this tends to be the F32 or even the F99 KOO series, which you'll see right here. So the F31 is the pre-doctoral, and the F30 can also be for MDs or PhDs and other dual degree fellowships. The F32 is your postdoctoral fellowship. The F33 is for your senior fellows. And the F99 KOO is this newer type of mechanism where you sort of get protected time as a postdoctoral fellow within this actually transition from pre-doctoral to postdoctoral fellowship. Now, an important highlight here is that different institutes offer different options. So not every institute is uniform. Some may offer the F31 and the F32. Some may offer the F99 KOO and others may not. So you just want to be very crystal clear as to what institute you're applying for so that you know the specific mechanisms that they are offering. Now, for the grants, these are actually quite nice. From a predoctoral perspective, they can support you to 5 years. And for the postdoctoral perspective, so like the F32, you can have 3 years of postdoctoral training support. So that is wonderful, right? It's actually like full-time activity, almost like 100% coverage in this way. And so if you think about that, this is then the mechanism that provides you that protected time to do the research you're really wanting to do when maybe other support is unavailable, so that you have full dedicated time for your training as to what you want it to be. Now, there are multiple components to this type of grant, all right? They are not small. You have to write multiple things, including like your fellowship applicant section, your research training plan section, your sponsors, collaborators, consultant sections. I highlight these because these are really the big three that form the crux of this type of training grant. And there are other things you have to include as well, right? You have to include a budget, other research training plan sections, and there's more. You have an entire bibliography you must put in there, letters of support that have to come into play as well, your quote unquote bio sketch or your biography. And I think what's kind of interesting here is that you have to create this quote unquote scholastic performance section where you list all of your undergraduate and graduate courses with grades. So I always tell my mentees early on is you want to get all your documenting support as early as possible. You don't want to be incumbent upon an institute that is late in sending you your transcripts, right? So it's important to know all the sections you are going to have to write, because you need to make sure you have all of your resources available in a timely manner so that you get your grant writing done as efficiently as possible. You don't want little things to hold you up in that way. In terms of the applicant's background and goals for fellowship training plan, so again, this is a major crux of what you have to write, where you're discussing what already is your experience, and importantly, what are your goals? Like, what do you want to become? What do you need to become that? So you have to discuss and list tangible goals, and then how that research is going to facilitate your transition to that next part of your career trajectory. And also importantly, every single amount of your time must be accounted for. So the F31, the F32 will want to know that 100% of your time is being dedicated to what? So you have to list out every single thing you're going to be doing and the percent of time allotted to it. In terms of your aims page, right? So you have to create a very just sort of synthesized one-page document that lists your specific aims and your hypotheses. I always recommend to have no more than 2 or 3 aims, because one, too many aims creates too much of a diffuse type of sort of plan that you're putting together. And importantly, because of space limitations, that if you have more than 3 aims, you may not be able to get everything you need on that one page that is so critical that a reviewer is going to read to then decide, is this grant going to get funded? Yes or no. And I always encourage people too, that in the last paragraph of the aims page is that you're very optimistic, and that one, you're going to identify what your study is hoping to accomplish. 2, who you're going to become at the end of this project. And then 3, what is the next step in your career trajectory to show people that not only are you thinking of the present, but you're also thinking of the future. When you think of your research strategy, you have to list out these 3 critical areas: significance, innovation, and the approach. So the significance is this aspect of like, right, what gap do we have to fill? What is the gap in the clinical arena, the research arena that your study is going to address? Why is this clinically relevant to the NIH? In terms of innovation, this isn't a section that is completely needed unless it's specifically required by the NIH Institute. Now, for career development awards and other types of awards like an R series or something else, this is much needed. And I even encourage for the F award to discuss how your project or even your training plan is innovative. What are you doing that sets you apart from others? And then that dovetails nicely into the approach aspect, and that you're going to describe your methodology. And if you have it, including preliminary sort of studies. And this could be anything from a review paper that you wrote, from some pilot data that you have collected, or from data from your mentoring team that they're able to share with you. And definitely making sure that you really create really nice figures and tables to really highlight what you're trying to show the reviewers. Now, in terms of the respective contribution section, this is an interesting portion where you have to write this sort of one-page document about you and working with your mentoring team. And this would be the aspect of how it's a collaborative process. and how your mentors are going to work with you in the developing and writing of this grant, as well as carrying out the research training component. So the important take home away from this is any person you have on your team, albeit a mentor, an advisor, a consultant, etc., you need to specify what role they're going to play and how together you're going to accomplish the training goals. So just remember that point. If you're going to have somebody in this project with you, they need to have a very specific role as to what they're going to do. In terms of your sponsor and your institute, usually this is the aspect where you're going to write down there how your institute, where you're currently at, where you're writing this, one, is the best place to do this work. Two, that this is a mutually beneficial thing for you and for them. And then three, that they are supportive of you and your career trajectory. So this is a really nice page where you can do a lot of great work and service with albeit your mentor, the chair of your program, the chair of your department, to write a really strong section that shows why your institute is the ideal situation, and further, that they are going to support you unequivocally. Now, responsible conduct of research. This is a very critical area as well and required almost in every NIH grant now. It has a specific format to it, and you must address these 5 different aspects here of like sort of the format of the research, the subject matter, how you're actually going to carry out the instruction for the responsible conduct of research, albeit who's going to do it, how long is it going to happen, and the frequency of when it's going to happen. So the NIH takes ethical and responsible conduct of research extremely seriously. So make sure that this section is as tight as possible. And this is where it's helpful, again, working with your mentor, your program chair, your departmental chair, or even your Office of Human Research and Protection or institutional review boards at your institute to put together a nice cohesive plan of your research training in terms of ethics and responsible conduct of research. Now, sponsors and co-sponsors, this is a hugely critical aspect. You get 6 pages only, and you need to use them quite well. And this is where, with your sponsors, your mentors, your advisors, this is the section where you're pretty much discussing them. Like, right, what's their infrastructure? What are their labs like? What type of support can they provide to you? Albeit is it financial support, tangible support, equipment, administrative assistance, research assistance, etc., recruitment and retention types of strategies to help you depending on what you need to do. You have to articulate and itemize out their prior fellows and trainees and those success stories of those fellows and trainees, the training plan of like what these people are going to do with you. So depending on the type of research you want to do, you want to make sure that it aligns well and it complements the training plan. So thinking about this, let's say if you say like, okay, when I graduate, I'm getting my doctoral degree right now, I'm going to become a clinical neuropsychologist, then it would be nice. And if the research and the training plan both identify strategies for you then to become a successful clinical neuropsychologist, maybe even in the training plan, you're including aspects in there of like getting your diplomat or other types of advanced training as a postdoctoral fellow. The environmental research facilities, this is basically listing out that the institute has the resources that you need. For example, let's say your study, you're going to use neuroimaging. Then your institute has the scanner that you need and the equipment, as well as the infrastructure needed to support that type of experimentation. And this is important right here in terms of the number of fellows or trainees to be supervised during the fellowship, because what reviewers are looking for is that your mentor, your advisor is not overcommitted, meaning that they can actually make the time to meet with you, to be with you, and to provide that mentorship and that guidance. So if somebody sees, gosh, this mentor has like 10 or 15 other trainees at the same time, can that mentor then really provide the 20% of time that they've said in this application? So, right, you want to be very mindful that you have a mentoring team that is able to dedicate that time to you so that you can accomplish your goals. And then, of course, the mentors will talk about as the applicant, your qualifications and your potentials for a research career, meaning they're going to highlight the reason why you are a strong applicant right now and what sets you apart from others, and the fact that you have the ability and that you would become an independent scientist one day. So this section, I cannot speak highly enough to the fact that it has to be absolutely rock solid, covering all of these aspects. In terms of the institutional environment and commitment to the training section, so this is also another one of those areas where the program, your director, your chair, has to really work with you and your mentoring team so that you can lay out there why your institute can train you and provide you this support. So, right, what is the program, the graduate program? How many people have they actually been able to advance in terms of grants like this or other types of grants? What type of courses are they offering? What are the exams like? What has been your progress to date, and what will be your progress in the future? So, because this is a fellowship opportunity, you're being reviewed as the applicant, your mentors are being reviewed as the people to be training you, but your program and your institute are also being reviewed as well. So you have to make sure that all three of those, almost the trifecta, are really top notch to accomplish what is needed as set out in the aims page and the overall goals. Now, when writing the grants, I always think and remind people, look at what the review criteria are, and you want to interject these things into and integrate them into every aspect of the grant that you can. And there are 5 areas for review: the fellowship applicant, the sponsors, collaborators, consultants, the research training plan, the training potential of the applicant, and the institutional environment and commitment to training. And I highlight this right here in red. You must identify a primary sponsor. Because these are fellowship grants, somebody has to be there with you. Now, it can be a primary, it can be a co-sponsor. That's up to you and your mentoring team. But somebody has to be identified who's going to be on this journey with you. Now, in terms of the areas of review for the fellowship applicant, right? What are the academic records? What's their research experience? Does the applicant demonstrate commitment to a research career in the future? Think about this. The NIH or any agency you're applying to, they are investing in you as the applicant to become a scientist, right? It's not just about the research project. It is just as equally important, if not even more important, is that you, the person, are you one day going to be that independent scientist at the NIH or any agency around the globe wants support who can do incredible science? So that's why the fellowship applicant, this review criteria comes here as to, do you have a commitment to a future career in science? So somewhere in this writing of this grant, it needs to state, I want to become an independent scientist. I look forward to continuing to have an academic scientific career, so that they know that's exactly the course you have set, and that's the person that they are wanting to fund. Now, in terms of sponsors, collaborators, this is also quite critical, right? So who are the mentors? Is there a complementary match between the mentoring team and the applicant? Does the mentor know, does the sponsor know what the applicant needs? Does the sponsor have a commitment to the applicant, right? Are the roles of the sponsors, collaborators, consultants justified? And this is where I sort of mentioned earlier, where like if anybody is on this project, they must have a defined role. You can't just throw anybody on here. It must be somebody who is selectively chosen because they complement the mentoring team, they complement you, they bring an area of expertise, and they're going to help you to execute successfully part of the training goal as well as part of the research goal. The training plan for research. So, right, does it have high scientific quality? Does it have significance? Is it integrated with the research training plan, right? The proposed research plan itself? Do the training plan and the research plan complement one another? For example, a nice conduit here is that, say, if part of your research plan involved neuropsychological assessment, then maybe the training plan is, I'm going to be trained in neuropsychological assessment, both in person as well as virtual formats, so that the method of assessment you're doing, you are also getting training in. So, right, you want to find ways that they intersect one another. Also, is this project consistent with applicant's stage of research development? Now, this is a huge critical piece to think about from a pre-doctoral standpoint. It may not be expected that you're going to go recruit 100 people or 200 people and carry out 3 MRI scans plus other types of things. That is one, probably beyond the budget of what a pre-doctoral fellowship award would do, but then two, would you even have the time to do something like that? So make sure what you're going to do is feasible because reviewers will look at that. The training potential. And again, this goes to that aspect of like, that's great that you're in this process now, but one, do you have the potential to actually achieve the goal you've established? And even more importantly, two, do you have the potential to become an independent scientist down the road? So you have to make sure that you're convincing the reviewers that you have both the current and the future perspective to become the scientist you're wanting to become. For the institutional environment commitment, mainly for this one, what they're looking for is, does your institute have the resources you need? And then two, are they going to support you? Those are the two major takeaways from the institutional environment and commitment to training portion. Now, when think about writing the grant, and now I'm going to talk about tips a little bit, use the grant review criteria again to sort of stage the way you're writing this, right? Interject those things so that like, if the reviewer is asking the question, like, does this applicant have the potential? Maybe there's a sentence from your mentor or somebody else says that this applicant has incredible potential, right? Use the same language from the review criteria in your grant because that's what reviewers are going to be looking for. Now, in terms of success rate for the F-31s, if you look, this is a trajectory, it's a little bit difficult to read. The nutshell bottom line is that the success rate is about hovering around like 28 or so percent in 2019 for an F-31 award. And in terms of F-32, if we look at 2019, again, a bit difficult to read, but it's about the same rate, right? Just about this 28 or so percent. So the chances of getting these, I mean, it's a very competitive grant to get. So 28% chance of actually getting it in this way. They are incredible opportunities. And again, I highlight these because other types of granting agencies across the globe, this is somewhat similar to what those others might be. There are multiple components that need to be written, and you always want to make sure that you are doing everything you can to write the grant the way that agency needs it to be written. The last thing you want is that your grant is kicked out or not reviewed because of an administrative error. So always make sure that whatever grant agency you go with, you know what the components are for the grant that you need to write. Now, speaking of that, let's go through career development awards for a moment. So these are K grants, meaning you've already graduated, you're now a postdoctoral fellow, writing one of these as you become an early career investigator. Just like the F series, there are multiple types of K awards. There's the K99 to ROO, also called the Kangaroo. There are K22 grants, there are K23, K24, K01, etc. Yeah, I always call these like the K club of grants in a way. And just like the F series, not every institute offers a uniform blanket of these K awards, right? So one institute may offer a K24, but another one may not. One may offer a K23, the other one may not. So again, make sure you know what institute you're applying to and what grant mechanism you are eligible for. Now, the K99 RO is a sort of a unique one because it offers sort of a career development training for 2 years, and then this independent research, this RRO phase for up to 3 years. Now, the thing with this is that if you get it, you actually have to apply again, sort of like at the end of year 2 to justify that you're ready to start the ROO phase. If you're going to write these, you want to start this as soon as you become a postdoctoral fellow. These are extremely competitive, but they are really incredible opportunities because, again, it's this aspect of going from a career development award for 2 years to then an independent scientist phase for the next 3 years. So these also have a different multiple components to them than some other K awards have because of this RRO phase that's in there. In terms of other types of grants that we'll sort of go through in this regard would be like the K01, the K08, or even the K23 aspect. So these are different ways from sort of like bench to basic science type of work, all the way to sort of clinical scientists to working with mentored patient oriented research aspects. But most of the review process is the same, and most of the format is the same in terms of that it's a 5-year grant. You get 75% of protected time, which is incredible. Um, you have to make sure you have an incredible plan for your training, as well as becoming independent in your science. You have to just show and justify that your institute that you're applying to does support you, and that down the road you plan on applying for an independent research award, such as, for example, like an R01 type of grant from the NIH, or another type of independent grant from another granting agency. This one, just like the F, has a ton of components to it. Just to briefly highlight, right, you have your introduction, but only for a revision, your aims page, your candidate about who you are, your career development plan, and your research strategy. So numbers 3, 4, and 5, the candidate, career development plan, and research strategy, this is the crux of this whole project. The other stuff is essential. You must have it, but these are the sections that really are going to be reviewed the most. Other aspects, again, that are required, I highlight this because, again, every grant has its own makeup, and you want to make certain that you're following the format to the letter, because you don't want to have an administrative error that precludes your grant from being reviewed. So just always make sure you're following every single thing you need to in terms of the format for the grant. Now, what's really neat with K awards is that they are highly invested in by different institutes. Now, this bar graph up here is from 2016. It just shows the number of awards given by institute. It can be a little tricky to read, but in the National Institute of Mental Health in 2016 gave 300 of these awards. The National Cancer Institute gave 400 career development awards. The success rate is actually better than it is for the F award. In 2019, for a KO1, that it was a 32% success rate, 44% for the KO8, and 37% for the K23. So you almost have a 1 in third, almost 1 in 2 chance, depending on what type of grant you write from a K series, of getting this grant. So the success rate is actually in your favor in a way. So just a note that these grants, it takes a lot of time to write them, but the reward is quite incredible given the 5 years of protected time. And given that other success rate for other grants, like an R01, for example, from another institute, might have an 8% success rate, right? So you have like maybe a 1 in 20 chance of getting it. Here you almost have like a 1 in 3 chance of getting this grant. So I can't strongly encourage enough to try to apply for these types of mechanisms or other similar mechanisms from other agencies that have a similar type of success rate and sort of type of grant structure that provides so much protected time and resource. Now, in terms of the review criteria, you have the overall impact, right, which every grant does. Like, what is the overall success of this grant? Like, how great could it be? That determines the overall impact score. But it's also dependent upon these 5 specific sections of the candidate: you, the career development plan, the research plan, the mentoring team, and the environment and commitment. So the candidate, I've listed all this here, and I know it's a lot to read, but just to highlight is that, do you have as the candidate the potential to be independent? Does your prior training set you up to be successful for this grant? Do you have the potential to organize, to manage, and implement this study? Do you have the training and the data management that's needed for the trial you're going to be doing? So basically, this is all about you. And so you really have to make sure that you have sold yourself as well as you can be in your candidate section of, right, what is your background? How does that make you successful for this portion? And then how will this portion set you up for that next stage? In terms of your development plan, so are you doing what you need to do to become that independent scientist? And that's building upon, not replicating your prior training. So let's say, for example, you already have your PhD in clinical psychology and you already have a lot of training in clinical neuropsychology or neuropsychometrics. That's probably not the training you're going to put into this career development award, because it'd be duplicative of what you've already done. So now you need to add on things that will advance what you have already accomplished. And that's what you're looking for here, is that newness and scope of training that advantages you beyond from where you are and puts you in an incredible stage to be successful for that next part of your career, the research plan, right? Do you have sound, significant aims and hypotheses? Are your methods of the nature that they're going to actually accomplish the goals you have set out to address your aims and hypotheses? And I would also highlight in here too, is that you really want to make sure, again, just like with the F award, that your career training plan is integrated with your research plan such that the research plan almost becomes like a tangible way to then enact what you're being trained on. So it almost provides like a nice real world simulation so that you can actually execute in real time what you have learned in a didactic or what you've learned from mentoring. So you want to make sure that those are really nicely weaved together. In terms of the mentoring team, just like with the F award, this is extremely critical. Do you have the mentors you need to accomplish your training and research goals? And again, to set you up for success for that next stage. If you have a mentor on here on your K word who, let's say, perhaps was like a PhD advisor or a chair of your dissertation or has been a mentor to you for a number of years, then what you also have to highlight is how this mentor and you are going to somewhat, quote unquote, you might say separate, meaning that the mentor is going to support your independence and help you to become independent. And just as you are being reviewed as a candidate, your mentors are also being reviewed as well. So reviewers will look to them as like, who have they mentored in the past? Have their prior mentors been successful in getting grant funding? Have they been successful in ensuring that their mentees actually become independent? So they're looking for all sorts of things to make sure that you have the most qualified mentors, and importantly, that you have the right amount of mentors and the experts to help you accomplish the goals you have identified. In terms of your institute, I sort of bolded the two major things to think about in terms of this section of review. One is the commitment to your career development needs to be extremely strong, where they are unequivocally saying you will have every resource that this institute can provide you. And then second, that this institute sees you as a valuable team member and they want you to continue to grow as a valuable member of the department of the institute and continue to carry out your independent line of research. So with all that said, let's think about some just like grant writing tips and strategies, right? Because again, almost like as the first slide showed, grant writing can be, it's laborious. There's a lot to it. It can provoke a lot of anxiety. I mean, it's think about if you ever had anxiety about writing your dissertation, I would say multiply it by 100, if not more, and that can be the anxiety with the grant. Now, grant writing can also be somewhat fun depending on who you are. Like me, sometimes I'm like, actually, I find grant writing to be quite enjoyable depending on the topic I'm writing on. So think about your research question and study. Make sure you are writing a grant that you love. Like this is your passion, that you could write until 2 or 3 in the morning on this topic and just absolutely enjoy it, because this is, well, your goal in life is to have this project and to become that type of scientist. Identify the agency that you're going to go for, right? So every different agency has their own mission and vision, and they all offer different types of grant mechanisms. So you want to find out which one is going to best align with your goals at your stage of your career, as well as setting you up again for success for that next step of your career development. It is absolutely critical to have a mentoring team. Grants are never written alone to my knowledge. I don't know of it. It always, I mean, it takes a village, it takes a mentoring team to get an incredible grant written and then hopefully successfully awarded. So you just want to make sure you're getting as much advice and guidance as possible. And this can be senior mentors, mid-career mentors, peer mentors. I mean, all mentors. Mentoring teams are huge. I cannot stress them enough. You want to make sure about also when's the best time to write and submit this grant, right? So think about where you are in your career stage in your personal life. Think about other things you have ongoing at that time. Can you dedicate 6 months of time to writing a grant and getting it submitted where you are in space? So I always tell my trainees, like, think a year in advance. Think about aligning that grant writing with the other commitments that you have in your entire life, right? From personal as well as professional. And then where does this grant align with that? And then creating a time schedule for writing your grant, right? So think about if you're doing a postdoctoral fellowship and you're trying to write a K award, that you're doing a clinical neuropsychology 2-year fellowship and you're seeing patients and you're trying to write articles, you're trying to go to conferences, you're trying to interview for things. There's a lot, and you're trying to have a life. And this is pre or post COVID times. I can imagine even right now with all these things going on, there's a lot going on in life. So you just have to make certain that this is aligning in that space that you can make time for. Make sure that you speak with people about like grant writing workshops or classes. These are so invaluable. Usually most institutes have a type of grant writing resource, albeit they can provide templates, they can provide examples, or they even provide like workshops. Different organizations provide workshops, different NIH institutes provide workshops. So I just encourage people always try to find a workshop if you can, because then you're getting all this incredible peer editing. You're getting to discuss your ideas and you're really getting to shape your ideas in your grant. See if your mentoring team, your peers, your friends, family even will help read and even edit the grant. And sometimes if you read a grant like 6, 7, 3,000 times, you start to glaze over like minor errors. This happens to me all the time. And then I will have a peer mentor and they're like, oh, you missed this, you missed this, you missed this. And it's better for us to catch that than the reviewer to catch that. I can't stress enough. Again, make sure that you can build in the reviewer criteria into your grant. So as a reviewer is looking through the grant and they're looking for those different things on their checklist, you have now used that similar language in the review. You've made it so easy for them to then find it. So hopefully they're seeing it and they're like, oh yes, this is absolutely perfect. Make sure, right, you don't have a lot of space sometimes when you write these grants. You have to choose your words carefully. Simpler, the better typically. And you want to make sure that you're using your tables and figures wisely, right? Don't just have a table or a figure just to have a table or a figure. Make sure it's being used for a specific point. And I cannot overstress this enough. Be organized, be prepared, be proactive. Again, grants take a lot of time to write, and you want to make sure you're using your time as wisely as possible. And I also can't stress this enough too of self-care. I mean, grants take a lot. And as you're writing them, as you get them submitted, and let's say perhaps you get a bad review and it's not funded yet, right? Okay, well, now you got to go back and revise the grant and get it back in. Life is still ongoing. So just I can't overstress self-care too. So just always make sure in whatever you're doing, and especially right now in this time, self-care is an absolute must when doing any activity at all. Grant writing is no exception in this way. Mentoring team. I cannot stress enough the value of a mentoring team. I've always believed in more than just one mentor. Having a mentoring team composed of incredible people to help you on your career journey. You want to find those people who have a record of grant funding, albeit from the NIH or other agencies, and those who have a record of actually helping other mentees, other trainees be successful in their career development, scientific development. And you want to make sure that you have the people on your team who can give you the guidance, the expertise that you need to accomplish the goals. And you also want to make sure that you're choosing mentors who have the time to dedicate to you. In terms of the primary or the co-mentors on grants like a fellowship grant or an early career development grant, they need to have at least be independent, quote unquote, you might say, in terms of their own funding, have current funding and resources, and an established record of mentoring other grant awardees. It sort of goes to that expression that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So in that sort of line, the best predictor of a mentor helping a mentee be successful is that mentor has helped other mentees be successful. In terms of your letter writers, and again, every grant might have a different thing of like who has to write a letter of support. You want to make sure that you're finding people who know you, who can really speak highly of you. If you've ever asked somebody for a letter of support and they're like, I guess I can maybe write one, that's not the person you want. You want the person who's like, I'm going to write you the best glowing recommendation letter you have ever seen. And you want this letter to be so strong that they are the person bragging about you, basically actually advocating for you to this funding agency as to why that agency needs to support you. And at the very end, that letter has to state that you are the strongest candidate and you have an incredible track record already and a guarantee of becoming an independent investigator again, because from the NIH perspective or other research funding perspectives, the goal isn't necessarily you're becoming a clinician. The goal is you're becoming a scientist. They are supporting you in your career trajectory to be a clinical scientist, a translational scientist, a research scientist. Somewhere where scientist is there. That's what they are funding you for. In terms of the NIH Institute, find the one that best fits you in the grant, right? Is it the National Institute of Mental Health, the National Institute on Aging, the National Institute of Neurological Disorder and Stroke, or any other type of agency there is? Again, the reason why this is important is because some agencies support some type of research over others. For example, if you're writing a grant on Alzheimer's disease, you'd go to the National Institute on Aging. But if you're writing a grant on depression, you'd most likely go to the National Institute on Mental Health. So you want to make sure that as you write this grant, that you start checking in with the funding agency early on to ensure that this is something that they would probably want you to do. And this will happen numerous times where you will write this like incredible looking aims page with your aims and hypotheses. You will identify the institute you want to go to. You'll contact that primary program officer and they'll be like, you know what, we like aim 1 and 2, but we do not like aim 3. If you change it to this, we might consider this, right? You have to get buy-in from the institute because they are investing in you and they are investing in your project. In other types of tips, I can't strongly enough encouraging a calendar. You've got to maintain a schedule of events that you have got to get accomplished. So, right, you have multiple components, almost like 30 different components to write for these types of NIH grants. And other granting agencies also usually have multiple components as well. I know when I wrote my career development award, I spent 1 year writing it. That was before it even got submitted. So, right, you have to keep track of the time that you're expending, not to mention you still have other things actually going on. Make sure that you're blocking time to write. Make sure you're blocking time just to daydream so you can think about what you need to accomplish. Make sure that you're getting your mentoring team sort of drafts in a timely manner. Don't ever delete sections, right? I have been told numerous times when I've written grants like, oh, take out this whole section. And one of my advisors early on in my doctoral training always told me, and her words ring well to me this day, is that don't delete it, just take it out, move it somewhere else, and keep it for another day because you might use it for another project. And I can't tell you how many times I've actually done that. Never delete something, just move it out, and then you never know, you might use it again somewhere else. And I can't strongly enough encourage EndNote. If you're not using EndNote, if you're going to write a grant, please use EndNote. It is the best thing to do when writing a grant. Make sure your aims page is strong. Make sure you have incredible conversations with the program officer at the NIH or again, whatever agency you're going to go to, because again, as sort of I state right here, you've got to get buy-in from the program officer or that agency. And usually what is a helpful thing to do is that you, your mentor, and that person would set up a time to speak by phone or by video to discuss your plan, who you are, and how this aligns well with that institute or that funding agency. Because these will be the people who would then champion you after the review process. And then in terms of getting a letter from your chair, like your department chair, if you have to have one, set up a meeting with you, your mentor, and your departmental chair so that your departmental chair gets to know you a bit more and can really help write a super strong letter of support for your grant application. In terms of the career development plan, identify what you need to learn. And just like you would have a research aims page with aims and specific tangible hypotheses, have tangible career goals, even with tangible products. So for example, I will have accomplished this when I have published this one paper, so that you're being very specific to the reviewer as to why you will be accomplishing the goal and how you're going to be accomplishing it. Think about this too. Whenever you're writing your career plan, albeit from the fellow perspective, the early career perspective, et cetera, it needs to have somewhere in there that you plan on becoming an independent investigator. Because again, at the end of the day, that's what these fellowship and career grants are designed to do. Yes, they are designed and they provide certain amounts of resources to carry out a research project, but the majority of them are centered around you as the investigator and supporting you. So, last but not least, some resources. The American Psychological Association, the National Institutes of Health offer different things. If you like YouTube, NIH Grants actually has some really nice YouTube that are very user friendly to watch about different grants and how to even write different portions of a grant. And then the NIH Research Training and Career Development website also has a nice thing about the career development grants, which one to go for, the different components to them. And then if you like podcasting, there's the NIH All About Grants. And if you're looking for a different granting agency, then I'd recommend you go play on their website and then contact them as needed to see what types of resources they might offer as you want to start writing that type of grant. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and I'm happy to take questions from people.
Thank you so much, Dr. McClintock. There was such good information and tips in there. We do have a few questions, so let's go ahead and jump into those. The first question is related to previous grant funding. So will not having a previous grant like an F-31 impact the likelihood of receiving a postdoctoral K or F award? Or do you, let's answer that first, actually.
Usually, no, it would not. Now, would having an F-31 help you perhaps make you more successful or maybe tip you in the successful area? Yes. But not having one, no. For example, I had a career development award. I never had my own F award or my own F-32 award in this way. So everybody has their path. Not having that one at the beginning does not stop you from getting one down the future. And just like I know colleagues who have had, for example, the independent award, like the ARA one, without ever having any type of prior NIH grant. And now they had other outside agency grants, but they never had their own NIH grant before getting their own ARA one.
Gotcha. Do you have any recommendations for how to improve your competitiveness as an applicant for future funding if you, for example, applied for a predoctoral F but didn't receive funding or don't have that track history?
Usually what I'd recommend if you applied for something and let's say you did not get that award, look at what the reviewers noted, right? Because they're going to highlight the reason why they did not make this successful, and then take that feedback and then learn from it, right? I mean, first it's probably like, gosh, why did you not grant this to me? I'm really upset right now. And have that space. It's real emotion. I know I had mine when I had my first rejection. It's real. It's okay. But if the advice is constructive, use that to your advantage to grow from that. So for example, the reviewer was like, you didn't have enough publications. Okay, I need to increase my amount of publications, both data-driven as well as review papers. You didn't have the right amount of mentors. Okay, let me examine my mentoring team. Let me talk to my mentors to see who else can we bring on board as needed. So I would recommend things like that. And aside from that, from a general standpoint, given this is science, two things to always think about: publications and mentoring team, right? Because that you need the publications to help show a bit of a foundation that you are committed to this, and that hopefully you already have some data that's going to support your grant. And then your mentors who have resources, both educational to provide to you as a trainee, and then tangible in terms of the resources needed to carry out the research project.
Okay, perfect. And actually that answer had part of a question from someone else. Is it better to have pilot data for your grant application, or do non-piloted studies get funded as well?
I had a mentor whose advice was always, you can never have an aim or hypothesis without the pilot data. So and I've had another mentor say, you don't need pilot data because in the field, that's already the pilot data out there. There's no right or wrong. I will say having pilot data at minimum shows feasibility that you can actually carry out something. So even if it's like, I only have one person, but you've demonstrated the technique you're going to do, you demonstrated to the reviewers that you can do the technique you've stated. So I would always, as I tell my own trainees, if at possible, try to have some of your own pilot data. Even if it's a meta-analysis, it's a review paper, it's something that you're showing that you have brought together information that you've digested. In addition to that, if it even is a participant that you can have some data on to show, again, the feasibility of your methodology.
Right. Okay, that certainly makes sense. Next question is related to international students. Are there restrictions for students who are international? Um, yeah.
There are, yes, the different NIH grants, some of them are, a student who is not a United States citizen may be ineligible for them. But this is where I always encourage people, you need to contact the NIH to see what you are eligible for, to make sure that you're not wasting your time applying for something. Because some grants, some people who are not United States citizens are eligible for certain NIH awards. So, but
Okay.
you need to have that conversation with them to find out which ones you are eligible for.
Okay, that's really good advice. You discussed the importance of funding history for primary mentors. What
Mhm.
about identifying or selecting a sponsor or institution outside of an academic setting, like a nonprofit or a private practice, for example?
Mhm. I think the main thing with that is, does the institute have the resources you need to carry out the project? And if it does, and they're committed, then that hopefully would be seen as a viable institute to have as your sort of home base. But that's the main thing they're looking for is, does your institute have the resources you need? And again, I'll highlight the example, like if you wanted to do a grant in neuroimaging, that your institute doesn't have any MRI scanners at all, and that's what you're going to use, that's not going to be successful. And
Right.
then sometimes what you'll also see as a strategy is that some mentor on the mentoring team might be at other institutes. So, for example, I know when I wrote my K award, I had mentors at 3 different institutes. And so I was able to use some of the advantages of some of my other mentors off my home site, their resources from an educational perspective to advance my training goals.
That's a great idea. The next question is if you're interested in the RK99 but are a neuropsychology fellow. So this person
Mhm.
talks about how board certification for neuropsychology, you need a minimum of 50% clinical work, but the
Mhm.
K99 requires 75% research time.
Mhm.
Do you have any advice on that, or when would be the best time to submit for that grant for someone who is a fellow?
I can say from my own perspective, I had a K-23, and so actually I had to take an extra year to get my clinical neuropsychology training to be eligible to apply for my diplomat. And so this is that aspect where perhaps maybe the postdoctoral fellowship in clinical neuropsychology might not be 2 years, maybe it might be 3 years. So in the K award, as you're writing it, you might even build into it that diplomat training aspect actually, so that you're making sure that you're getting the hours you need. But this is where I always encourage trainees to make sure that you're talking with your mentors about exactly what you want to accomplish. And if getting your diplomat is one of your goals, you have to make sure you're advocating for your protected time to accomplish what you need to be eligible to apply for that.
That's a really good advice. And it's good to hear that there are possible ways to make it work.
Yes.
Let's see, would previous grants from a specific NIH institution minimize the chances of receiving funding from other NIH institutions?
I'm not aware of that at all. And in fact, you'll see many people who might, for example, apply to the National Institute of Mental Health. And then next year, they'll apply to the National Institute of Neurological Disorder and Stroke because of the different themes of their research or their different grant projects. So I'm not aware of getting, let's say, a grant from the National Cancer Institute precludes you from getting a grant from the National Institute of Mental Health.
Okay. This next question, I think we might have answered part of it, but I think there might be a broader question in here. So the question is coming from a private practice as opposed to having experience working in an academic setting with previous history of working on grants, for example. Is that a disadvantage when it comes to applying for grants?
I don't think it would only be the disadvantage in a sense if you didn't have maybe some of the publications another applicant had, or you didn't have some of the pilot data another applicant had. But this is where I think it's really crucial to tell a really compelling story as to why now you are doing this and why you have switched. And for example, moving, let's say, from private practice to wanting to become like an academics and get these types of grants, that's an awesome story to actually tell, and what led you to that transition, and now what are you doing to put plans into place to be successful with it, and that you are going to continue the trajectory, not go back to being in private practice. Because again, from an F award or a award, a career development award, they're funding you to become an independent scientist. So the career development award, a funny thing with it, it's always be a catch-22. If you have too much experience, then why do you need to have a career development award, right? And if you don't have enough experience, then are you competitive? So if you're coming from a private practice, the goal is to make sure you convince them and tell an incredible, compelling story as to why now the switch and what you have done to put some resources together for you to be successful.
Yeah, that is a really good point. I'm glad we were able to tap on that part as well. Um, this question, I think, will be our last for today. Are there any F grant or are F grants more heavily focused on the training value of the project or the innovativeness of it? Obviously, both are important, but which do you see as a more important factor?
My impression has been the training portion, as that they really want yes, that's one thing. I always call that the icing on the cake. But here, think about, right, you're getting your doctorate degree, if it's an F31 or if it's an F32 in your postdoctoral fellowship, you need that incredible richness of training to be successful with the next part. So make sure that training is top notch. That's the thing to focus on, not necessarily the innovation of it.
Wonderful, thank you. Before we end for today, Dr. McClintock, we do want to keep you on just for a minute with the panel to take a group picture. But thank you everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate your time, and this recording will be on our website later this week. And join us next week for our research talk on inflammation in Alzheimer's disease or immune functioning in Alzheimer's disease. All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Be safe and well.
Annie, can we stop the recording?